Oi, Vanessa. Bom dia. Bom dia. Okay, let's start. Good morning or good afternoon for those are in Dutch time. I'd like to welcome everyone to our lecture series, which is part of the course Into the Void, a collaboration between FAU USP and TU Delft, with a team that includes Nelson Mota, Vanessa Groisman, Harold Monge from TU Delft, and me, Luis Recaman, Marcos Rosa, and Mariana Wildenholm from FAU USP. The course's lecture series proposes a debate about the relationship between the low housing density of Barra Funda, the housing crisis in São Paulo, and the agenda of urban social movements that claim the right to the city. Well, we'll be recording the class for education purpose only, and at the end of the lecture, we will open for questions. Today, we are very honored to host the architect and urban planner, Fernando de Mello Franco, who kindly accepted to join with us today. Fernando de Mello Franco is an architect and urban planning PhD from FAU USP and a professor at FAU Mackenzie. He is a researcher and the urban specialist consultant for several multilateral and third sector bodies, such as World Bank and Lincoln Institute of Land Policy and ONU Habitat and Urban, with works carried out in Latin America and Africa. He was Secretary of Urban Development of the Municipality of São Paulo from 2013 to 2016, and was a founding partner of the MMPB office and the collaborator of the architect Paulo Mendes da Rocha. Paulo Mendes da Rocha, as you may know, passed away the day before yesterday at the age of 92, setting new for all of us. But I imagine that it was especially sensitive to Fernando, who had a very close relationship with him, who was one of the most inspiring and important architects in the recent decades. Fernando, thank you very much for being with us, and the meeting, the screens is yours.
Well, thank you so much. That's a pleasure to meet you all. I would like to apologize my English because I've not been traveling since the pandemics. First of all, I would like to say that Paulo Mendes da Rocha would love us to keep moving and to enjoy life. And I think we should celebrate his passage through us, drinking and talking about architecture, about cities, about civilization, about the future. Well, my specific goal today is not to talk about Barra Funda itself, but to somehow to make a context about what's going on, what are the main subjects of debate nowadays in São Paulo, so you can yourselves positioning in the territory, but also in the field of ideas in order to establish the main actions that you find necessary in order to transform a very strategic area of São Paulo. I would like to share my screen. Basically, my speech will be a visual speech. So I think it can help you all to understand what's going on here in São Paulo. Well, as you may know, São Paulo is that big, 40 kilometers by 60 kilometers in the metropolitan area, and we are around 21 million inhabitants. The municipality of São Paulo itself is just a part of the metropolitan area. And the actual population is around 11, almost 12 million inhabitants. The area I'm gonna talk more specifically is what we call Arco Tietê, where Barra Funda has a very strategic position. Well, to better understand São Paulo, we have to understand this very dramatic context of inequality. In this diagram, what you see in purple are the areas where formal jobs are set. And you can see how concentrated the formal jobs are and totally connected with where you can see the black lines, which are the main public transportation lines, where we can find a big effort from the public sector in order to provide the city with infrastructure. By the other hand, where we see no action from the public sector, we can see the urban sprawl, the most vulnerable areas, which now are a collection, a set of exploded fragments, which somehow holds 1/3 of the metropolitan population. When we put both diagrams together, it's so easy to understand the social territorial exclusion context, the inequality context, and all the externalities that this context provokes in our city in terms of social aspects, economic aspects, but mainly and also in terms of environmental aspects. This illegal urban sprawl is going deep into the most sensitive environmental protection areas, where basically we produce food, we produce water for the surviving of the population, the surviving of 21 million inhabitants. And this is a big conflict. This is a huge problem. This process is putting the water production in risk. It's also putting the food production in risk. And is also going deeply into the forest. It's really interesting to know that in terms of the metropolitan area, only 26% is occupied by what we call city, by urbanization. And 43% is native forest, plus 45% is native forest, plus 3% of planted forest, which means that half of the area of the metropolitan region is basically forest. Mata Atlântica, which is a specific kind of rainforest, which is responsible for all the richness of biodiversity. These all are in risk, and even more because what we see is that the population, the vulnerable population, cannot access land, cannot access housing within the city. So what we see is the organized crime, PCC, as we call here in São Paulo, somehow structuring a very perverse and dramatic process of informal, illegal occupation of the environmental protection areas. And this gets even more dramatic when we get São Paulo's data in terms of demographics. Before the pandemic has changed this a little bit. We knew that around 2035, 2040, the population of São Paulo will stop. We will not growing anymore, and we believe we will start decreasing the population. And this is a good news. Somehow this is a good news. But the bad news is that until the moment we stop growing, the population stopped increasing, we still have 2 million people arriving. 1 million only in the municipality of São Paulo. So if we cannot allow the urban sprawl through into the environmental protection zones, where can we put 1 million new inhabitants until the growth stops? And we have very strong neighborhood movements who says, well, we don't want nobody here, not in my backyard. We don't want any kind of transformation and so. We have a very consolidated, a very huge consolidated area in the city at the moment. So if we cannot go through the forest, we cannot grow within the pre-existing fabric, where can we put those people? As a matter of fact, we have a strategic territory in the city, and basically this strategic territory is strategic because it's a historical process of transformation. What you see here is Rio Pinheiros. On the right, behind this hill is USP, University of São Paulo. On the left, CEAGESP. On the back, you can see Paulista Avenue. This is 1929, the preparation of the canalization of this river. And so many years ago, 70 years ago, as a matter of fact, we can see what São Paulo is now. This fluvial plain is totally changed. And on the bottom, we can see those houses, this industrial fabric, who is now spoiled, who is now open for the transformation of the industrial city to the contemporary city. So basically, we have the geography of São Paulo basin. You can see the main rivers on the horizontal line, Tietê. And you can see the hills, you can see the basins. And over this hydrological logic, so you can see the fluvial plain, this zone, and then we start adding the most strategic infrastructure elements, such as railways, connecting the harbor to the hinterland, allowing the industrialization that was supported by this. And we add a second layer about the railway system, which which, well, my connection is not so good. So if you're not listening, please let me know.
It's okay.
Perhaps we should all turn off our cameras, if it helps.
Well, the railway, the roads are settled on the same course of the rivers. And this all was completely necessary for the industrialization of the metropolis. The industry are all connected with the possibility of get water and get goods to be transported by the railway and roads as well. And when we put all together, we see how strategic the fluvial plains are in terms of the historical process of urbanization. And now what we want, what we know is that we cannot use the water, the rivers, for sewage anymore. We have to reset a relation, a connection between the city and the water. The railway is not for goods anymore, but for moving people. And the industrial buildings, the industrial fabric is now open for renewal. So we have to provide new meanings of the main concentrated infrastructural systems that gave support for the transformation of a small village to a metropolis in just 100 years' time. So during our term at the Municipality of São Paulo, when we were responsible for the revision of the master plan, we add a new technical layer in this territory. And this technical layer is called Macroárea de Estruturação Metropolitana, macro area of metropolitan structuring. Although the master plan was related only to the municipal borders for sure, but why we define a macro metropolitan area in the master plan? Because as a matter of fact, we can see that São Paulo cannot be seen only through the municipality area, only through the metropolitan area, but we have to understand a very complex configuration where São Paulo is in the center of a set of metropolitan regions. And altogether, 173 cities are able to 73% of the state of São Paulo population, and almost responsible for almost 1/3 of Brazil's GDP. And those cities, those regions are totally connected. And we have at the moment the beginning of the transformation of the original railway system into a macro metropolitan transportation system, which will connect all regions together through railways, which is extremely important in terms of the decarbonization of our transportation metrics. The line São Paulo, Jundiaí, Campinas is under planning. The state government is going to start with World Bank financial help, maybe next year. And when this gets finished, this will improve the strategic position of Arco Tietê as the hub of this very complex system, which means that Barra Funda can be a neighborhood for those who live there, but Barra Funda belongs to a very strategic area of São Paulo, which is totally connected and which will get even more connected with the metropolis of São Paulo, with all those its problems and potentials. So the master plan defined this macro area of metropolitan structuring, which is subdivided into several sectors. Every sector has a name of the river it's connected. So Tietê Arch, Pinheiros Arch, Jurubatuba Arch, Jacopêssego Arch, Tamanduateí Arch. And Arco Tietê specifically occupies a very interesting void, which is its area is low occupied by residential uses. So when we look at the totality of those main macroáreas de estruturação metropolitana, we see so many empty buildings, so many voids, especially because the disindustrialization of the city that, according to the counts, could hold almost 1 million inhabitants. So this low dense area, by the other hand, holds an extraordinary number of industry jobs and also trade jobs, little field services jobs. But the area which has one considerable offer of formal jobs in the city has a populational density lower than the city average. So Arco Tietê, which holds almost 350 inhabitants nowadays, which corresponds to 3% of the population of the municipality of São Paulo, offers, by the other hand, 1.5 jobs per inhabitant. And the total area of this territory is 4% of the municipality of São Paulo. At the moment of this research, the density in Arco Tietê was about 65 inhabitants per hectare, while the municipality was 75, something like this. And we think we could add a considerable population living in a situation, in a position where it's extremely well connected with the job offer, but also with the macro metropolitan connectivity. So going close into Arco Tietê, you can here see the geography. Over this geography, we have this territory with 16 by 4 kilometers, which has the river and marginal as the main axis, which has a role in the local context, but its main role is in the metropolitan, the macro metropolitan role. And the north of this area and the south of this area are totally distinct. The river is a frontier, is a barrier. So basically, we see those maps are from, I don't know, maybe 2016, 15 maybe. So it's a little bit out of date, but you can see the amount of industry and warehouses in this territory. The majority of them on the south of Tietê River. At the same time, you can see how strong is the public transport network, although it serves basically the south and not the north of this area. And by the other hand, we see just small portions of housing. As a matter of fact, we have a huge void in this area. And here you can see that in spite of the fact that the main transportation system, the main warehouses, the main everything are below Tietê line, on the top of this map, you can see how dense is the presence of people living on the north, on the skirts of Cantareira Mountains, which is one of the 5 biggest rainforests within urban areas in the world. In this map, we can see the ZEIS, special zones of social interest, which are zones that the zoning law, the master plan, sets its use exclusively for social housing. So this is one tool that guarantees for the social housing policy access to land, since in terms of the law, only housing for people from 1 to 6 minimum wage can be built. And we have here, we have 5 kinds of ZEIS in the city. Now this map shows 4, but we have 5. And on the top in red, you see ZEIS 1, which is basically informal settlements, which policy is about urbanizing, is about regularizing the land title and so on. But the orange ones, ZEIS 3, are the ZEIS, are the zones which occupy very central and strategic areas of the city. Here we can see a map showing the social facilities, and once more we can see that we have a kind of void in the middle of this area, and we can see that although education and health are quite well distributed in the city, when we look to culture, we see that basically they are extremely concentrated on central area, on the more rich areas of the city, and basically we have nothing on the north zone. By the other hand, you can see the amount of sports facilities by the river, those green triangles, which are an specificity of this territory, since in the beginning of the urbanization of the city, Tietê was one of the main leisure places for São Paulo's inhabitants. This map shows the fabric, and what is interesting in this image is the amount of white areas on the map, and why can we find those huge areas? Because basically we have a significant amount of public lands. Basically, they overlap. And those areas were old, I don't know in English, meanders, old river curves, when the river was like a snake in its natural route. And when the municipality canalized the river, a significant amount of land gets under the property of the municipality. And those lands today are being used for an airport, for public facilities, for sport facilities, for green zones, and so on. But we also have a significant set of public lands totally connected with the railway, which are basically railway patios and warehouses connected with this transportation system. But we can say that basically Arco Tietê is where we can find the biggest concentration of public lands in the municipality of São Paulo, which allows the municipality to be in charge, to command the process of transformation of this area. But the thing is, well, all those maps were produced during the process of revisioning the master plan, which has been approved. Also, during the process of structuring urban projects for the Macroárea of Metropolitan zone, which have not been approved by law. It's under discussion even 5 years ago by its original moment. But the question is, we have today a distinct agenda, not distinct, this agenda, the environmental agenda was important since last century, but maybe now we have much more conscious about the meaning of the environmental agenda. And I could say that the master plan in its role, in its totality, is weak in terms of how the actions against climate change must be strengthening in the planning culture of the city. So in 1919, I guess, we did, Fernando, Tulio, Bruno Borges, and myself, we did a research for Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, trying to understand the potential of land value capture tools in those specific territories, the Macroárea of metropolitan structuring. How could they, together with the regulatory framework and the urbanistic tools, how could we act in terms of the climate change agenda? And we did a few maps trying to visualize where the main effects of climate, of the environmental issues are set in town. And of course, we could map that basically flooding is one of the main problems in the city, will get worse and worse and worse, as we know. And basically, the most dramatic flooding areas in the city are totally connected with the rivers with the fluvial plains, of course. The second aspect is about atmospheric emissions from road transport in São Paulo, and do marginalize, do the express road system, do the fact the region, the macro region flows pass through Arco Tietê, through Marginal Tietê. Arco Tietê is where we can see the highest atmospheric emissions from toxic gases, of course. And finally, do this emission, do the fact the old industrial fabric in the city has no trees, has no green areas, has nothing in terms of the green agenda, we can see that the most hot areas of the city corresponds to downtown area and also Tamanduateí axis and Tietê axis, where we produce what we call the heat bubble, a bubble that is responsible for the increase of the temperature of the city, but also responsible for the rain regime, which will get worse and worse. So what we see through those maps is that Arco Tietê, which is totally built, although low densely built, Arco Tietê can be a strategic territory for densification. We need space, we need to produce housing, especially for the most vulnerable ones. We cannot put them out of the city. We cannot put them on the environmental protection zones. We have to find a space for them, but the space we found is totally connected with environmental agenda. So one of the main challenges is how can we densify and at the same time provide actions how can we transform the territory in order to help to diminish the impact of the climate change agenda. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fernando. Well, very nice lecture. In addition to this kind of comprehensive version of the city, your talk was especially important for us to understand the region that you are studying. Well, I'll pass the floor for my colleagues and students for questions.
Hi, Fernando. Thank you so much for the lecture. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So you were mentioning now this balance between the challenge to densify, the need of densifying, and also attributing the environmental agenda. And immediately when you think of densifying and housing, I think we commonly think of the condomínio typology in Brazil, because of high rise, and you can, in the end, fit more people into a smaller plot of land. And in our studio, we've been exploring a little bit of how that typology can also be socially segregating, because it's a bubble. It isolates people into this inward community with their own amenities, pool, and all that. And you mentioned that there's the projection of being able to fit 1 million people into this Arco Tietê. In this projection, is the condominium typology a part of the projection of how these people would fit into the space, or is there some other approach that you guys have considered in this calculation?
Well, first, 1 million is in the totality of Macroárea de Estruturação Metropolitana. I can't remember, but I guess the projection for Arco Tietê was about 300 to 400,000 inhabitants. But this projection is just about numbers. It has nothing about morphology. So the morphology is open. What we know is that if we build high buildings, high skyscrapers, we have less field occupied, so we can have more infiltration, water, and so on and so. There are people who are in favor of this kind of typology. By the other hand, and this typology can be in gated communities or can be in an open space such as Brazil, if you want. But what we know in São Paulo is that the highest densities are not on the neighborhoods where we can see the highest buildings. Favelas, which are basically horizontal, they are much more dense than any high-class neighborhood for so many reasons. It's connected with the size of the unit, is connected with the number of people living within it. It's not connected with a morphology. But that's a big issue. Which kind of morphology can deal with the environmental agenda and also with what we can call about designing a kind of urbanity where we still can live in livable streets, dynamic streets, where it has sense to get out of home and walk to buy a bread, the day-by-day bread, instead of taking the car to going to a huge shopping mall to make a big shopping and so on and so. So, which is the balance? That's a good point.
Thank you.
Another question?
Well, if no one volunteer, I have a question and a comment. Thanks, Fernando, so much for your presentation. This was extremely enriching in the context of our class because with, of course, this collaboration between FAU and TU Delft is also premised on the idea that social justice go hand in hand with environmental justice in São Paulo. And this is why our leitmotif is really working on the topic of urban voids, but understanding that urban voids in São Paulo are not really only a vacant plot, but object of dispute and heated disputes and you know, the reclaiming not only of the right to housing, but also the right to the city, to a set of civil rights that we know in Brazil are so somehow limited and subject to inequity. And it was very instructive for us to see how we chose to work on, of course, ZEIS 3. They are the ZEIS of the urban void, so we decided to operate within an area that are delimited as ZEIS 3, and we chose to work on Barra Funda. And of course, when we have this, you know, when you explain about Arco Tietê, we understand that we are really, you know, at the heat of the problem. We are really at the center of everything in terms of pollution, and at the same time, one of the lowest dense areas in terms of housing. So this is really crucial to discuss, you know, the housing agenda for this area and how to think of housing in relation to all these urgencies in terms of the future of an inclusive city. That's what we want for São Paulo. And I just wanted to ask you, since you, of course, are a protagonist in this debate, if you could tell a little more about those delimitations of ZEIS. You know, because our students, they fail to understand why they were delimited as such. And of course, it was very crucial that you showed how that area has a lot of urban public land, let's say. But can you say a little bit more about how these ZEIS were delimited, or why they are, you know, some areas are included in the ZEIS 3s, others not? Because, of course, you know, we had some debate saying, well, you can also be critical of this delimitation. Of course, this is not an island. But if you could tell a little more to our students about those, it would be very instructive, let's say.
Well, they have a logic. Basically, we have ZEIS aiming at get minimum rights in informal areas such as ZEIS 1, which we have to confirm, legally speaking, its existence, but it's not for densifying, because they are extremely high densified areas. It's about providing titles to allow them to participate, to be included in the market. We like or not, we all belongs to the market, but them. So we have to allow them to get access to a title, to get funds, to be able to get so many benefits that they have the right to. We have ZEIS 2 basically on the skirts of the city, close to empty areas, very sensitive areas, because some of them should be environmental protection zones. Why they are ZEIS? Because we are responsible? No, because as Vanessa said, the city is a battlefield, and we have social movements, legitimate social movements, fighting for setting ZEIS. Why? We have weak environmentalists trying to avoid those areas to be set as housing zones. We have a dramatic situation in Brazil, which is close to Jaraguá, where we have one reserva indígena, indigenous reserve, social movements, legitimate social movements, fought for one specific place who is now being built by one company. And this is a big problem because it's affecting the tribe and so on and so on. And we have ZEIS 3 and ZEIS 5, which are on more strategic areas of the city. ZEIS 3 are the old ZEIS on central area of the city where you're going to work. At the last master plan, the idea of setting a ZACE was to set a huge perimeter where only few plots were able for social production. We decided it was politically impossible to reverse this. No one left behind, no ZACE being transformed, left behind. So we had to keep those, although they, technically speaking, they are wrong. But in the actual master plan, we decided to set plot by plot, and some of the plots are not precisely correct. And I can give you the idea of each one who has won the battle to set those ZACE. But the thing is, although we have ZACE, which is a specific tool for a specific goal, which is reserve land for production, this tool is not enough, because the owner just wait for the next mayor. Actually, they are waiting by now, the new revision to change, and that's simple. So we implemented a second tool, which is as much as important as ACE, which is PILC, parcelamento e distribuição compulsória, compulsory use of the land, which goes for increasing property tax, which says, well, although Brazilian Constitution says that every single one has the right of a property, the property can be, the land can be private property. This property has to have a social function. So if your property, although you have the right to have it, is not acting, is not providing a social function, so the municipality has the right to increase your property tax, and you have to put your land back to the market. If you don't do, then the municipality can expropriate your property with debt titles. So what we have, since this tool has been set, is that the municipality has already notified more than 1,500 properties, totalizing 2.5 million square meters just in 2 years. 2.5 million square meters are able to support 800 social housing units in the city, multiplied by 3, 240 inhabitants. So we have space in town. We have spoiled, void space in town, but we don't have access to this. So we have to combine ZACE with PILC in order to force this land to back to the market. What happened? We approved this tool in 2014. In 2016, it has been put on the side by the new municipality, and nothing happened since then.
Thank you so much.
I have a question, if that's possible.
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really clear and very nice maps of Sao Paulo and also Barra Funda. I had a question about the flooding and the water issue in Sao Paulo, and more on the smaller scale. In what way do you think there can be a solution of the water issue, or more on a smaller housing scale or area?
Well, we have what we call in São Paulo environmental quote. Every single new building has to get a handicap, a kind of handicap, a kind of tax of small systems such as water reservoirs, green roof, vertical green permeabilization area, and planting trees. This is important. This is not enough, especially because the new buildings are just a small portion of the pre-existing city. And what we know is that we have to amplify the capacity of our soil to get water and to reserve water. So we need more permeable areas, green areas. But for example, in the fluvial plains such as Barra Funda, it makes no difference if you have a garden, because the soil is already wet. It has no more space for reserving water. So what some researchers say is that you have to plant trees. Trees can, depends on its kind, trees can contain 30% of the rain for the next 2 hours. And trees can capture CO2. Trees can decrease the temperature of the city. Trees can make air better, and so and so. So if I could, I would think a way of putting the forest back within the city somehow.
I like that idea. Thank you.
Hello, Fernando. Can I also ask a question, perhaps? My name is Harold. I'm one of the teachers, but I'm the only one who has never been to Sao Paulo. And following also Bart's compliment, I would really like to compliment you firstly of the clear presentation on all that is at stake, both in the larger scale Sao Paulo and the area here. It really brought a lot to us. And I'm really glad this lecture is being recorded, because I think students can look at it again and again to get all the information processed and see what they can respond to on the site. But also maybe following Vanessa's question on the delimitation of the ZEIS 3, in this case, areas specifically, we see that, for instance, in the zone that we are working on, which is the ZEIS 3009, if I'm not mistaken, you see, of course, that this limitation just kind of for us as outsiders seems to make a division between two more or less similar areas of urban and production fields, meaning that if you would give these plots to different developers on each side, maybe something completely different might come out, because the rules that apply are different. With our students, we're of course not making proposals that are going to be realized for real. So we see the assignment as understanding the larger context of this area and making a kind of proposals that are prototypical, that could be used here, but maybe also in similar areas. I was wondering, in this strategy from your side, would you encourage the thinking of, let's say, these limitations areas, and having differences on different plots, having islands of certain kinds of developments versus other ones? Or would you rather encourage our students maybe to say, okay, what we propose, we might even include some parts on the other side of the Zeiss 3 area in order to make it work better, or to have cross connections throughout these areas? So is it a deliberate political tool for difference, or is it a necessary approach that, as you may already have suggested, is a result of many compromises?
I think this tool and the final result of this tool in terms of perimeters are a political response. It has just a feel with technique, with morphology, with urban quality. So although we have Zeiss, and they are waiting for social housing production, as a matter of fact, anyone can produce social housing anywhere in city, especially the public government. So I would encourage the students to think a little bit out of the box, which means a little bit out of the perimeter, including because this research could help in the political battlefield on how could we review this political tool somehow.
I totally agree with you, Fernando. Very, very nice for us.
There is no
another question. Yeah.
Yes, or maybe it's not really, I don't have really a particular question, really just following up on what already Vanessa and Harold mentioned, which was extremely helpful for us, your presentation today, because if there is something that for me was quite striking, is how you really make us feel that in a small intervention in such a, I mean, in one plot in Barra Funda really is addressing a much, bigger issue that has to do with the challenges related with climate change, environmental protection, exclusion and inclusion, social and environmental. So that when you, at a certain moment, I thought that you were really, giving away our, let's say, our assignment to the students, which was to formulate a research question, because I think that you brought, a key research question for this. How can you, create a trade-off between densifying those urban voids that are which are, very well infrastructured, where there are jobs, where there are opportunities for income generation, but to such an extent that by doing that, you are actually, let's say, implementing something that is having kind of as a side effect, protecting the invasion of environmental sensible areas. And that's always something that we were discussing this 1 hour ago, because we may also tend to look into places like the city center of São Paulo, looking into some of the sobrados, and having a sense of what Vanessa calls exoticism, right? That we look into them and say, oh, this actually looks so nice, having this little bit of almost a sense of a village in the city. But how can we balance, the preservation of some of these qualities of what we could also call the collective memory of the city, on the one hand, with, on the other hand, the necessity to increase and to densify these urban voids. So this is a sort of a conundrum that we have been obviously trying to address. I don't know if you have any, wise advice on this, or would you like to share your thoughts also on this issue of related with the collective, preserving the collective memory of the city on the one hand, but on the other hand, also trying to answer the necessity to increase the density to take the most of these urban voids.
Well, as you know, my background is not planning. My background is design. I was educated during a moment where the planning people was fighting against what they say, the drawing people, not the designing people, but the drawing. And I think this answer, your question is really good, that's the point, but I think the answer should come through design. Design can give the answer. It's not an abstraction. We have to test. We have to investigate through design the possibilities, the balance, and so and so. And yes, I think we should somehow preserve this industrial memory, because São Paulo has a weak history. We don't have monuments, we don't have churches, we don't have cultural heritage. Our built heritage is the modern buildings, such as Copan, Edifício Ibirapuera, and so on. And I think the industrial fabric, I love it. They occupy a vast surface of the soil. The problem. So how can, through design, we balance the maintenance of a kind of atmosphere, a kind of low, high, and not high, but low horizontal buildings, and how can we densify through this? I will see after your studio. I'm willing to see.
Yeah, I hope so as well. Thank you so much, Fernando.
Well, if you don't have any questions, I would like to say thank you again to Fernando. It was really a very, very important lecture for us, and the connection between your lecture and the answers for the questions was really very useful for our exercise, and we really believe that we can do something through the design, and it's what our students and the professor want to do, like academic exercise in this process, not only this year, but in the future years too. And I suppose that it's very important for this area, and it's very important for our discipline nowadays. And well, thank you again, and see you.
Okay, that's
Thank you. Thank you.
I can share the PowerPoint with you. I can send the link.
Nice.
It's a public. They are public images. Don't worry. And thank you so much. Very interesting questions. I'm really willing to see the final result.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fernando. It's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fernando. Hope to see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.